What happens when wild nature collides with human stupidity? You get legal codes that make you question our spot at the top of the food chain. Today, we are exposing the most baffling, utterly ridiculous wildlife regulations ever written by politicians trying to stop us from doing things no sane person should attempt. Get ready to lose a little faith in humanity, but laugh entirely too hard while doing it. 1. Let's say you spot a massive, peaceful grizzly enjoying a deep slumber. You might think nudging it awake for a quick social media post is a brilliant idea. Well, Alaskan lawmakers had to explicitly ban waking a sleeping bear for the purpose of taking a photograph. Ironically, hunting that exact same bear remains perfectly legal. It reveals a bizarre moral hierarchy where lethal force is totally fine, but disturbing a predator's nap for clout is a step too far. You really have to wonder about the basic survival instincts of the guy who inspired this legislation. 2. Combat sports promoters used to have a very loose definition of what constituted a fair, entertaining athletic matchup. Bizarre legislation officially outlaws organizing a boxing match against a live kangaroo. These highly muscular, aggressively territorial marsupials possess incredibly dangerous kicking power that can easily hospitalize a human. Yet, it took strict government intervention to finally stop promoters from pushing them into a boxing ring. It remains a deep mystery why crowds ever paid hard-earned money to watch a man lose a terrible fistfight to a marsupial. 3. Fashion should never cross species lines, especially when you are dealing with untamed beasts of the forest. An incredibly obscure local rule firmly declares that it is illegal to dress a wild raccoon in human clothing. While these clever trash bandits already wear a permanent mask, someone clearly decided they also needed a tiny sweater and matching trousers. Attempting to force tiny garments onto a furiously thrashing, heavily clawed woodland creature sounds like a guaranteed trip to the local hospital. The sheer stupidity of this offense is truly legendary. 4. Buying a ticket to a weekend blockbuster usually involves overpriced popcorn and finding the perfect seat. But in Baltimore, it also requires leaving your apex predators at home. An actual city ordinance strictly forbids bringing a lion into a movie theater. This wasn't written for fun. Municipal codes are almost always reactive. That means someone absolutely tried to stroll past the concession stand with the king of the jungle on a leash, forcing terrified city officials to officially outlaw cinematic outings with massive wild felines. 5. Empty glass terrariums in Georgia cannot legally contain any slithering creature you manage to safely catch out in the woods. State conservation laws strictly ban residents from keeping indigenous, non-venomous wild snakes as household pets. If you stumble across a completely harmless corn snake in your garden, placing it inside a tank is a massive wildlife violation. Authorities established this strict rule to actively prevent greedy amateur collectors from emptying the forests. You must exclusively purchase imported, non-native reptiles from licensed breeders. 6. Aggressive grimacing can land you behind bars if you direct it at the wrong species. Oklahoma law makes it a punishable offense to make ugly faces at a dog, and this surprisingly extends to strays and wild packs roaming the streets. Imagine the utter humiliation of standing before a stone-faced judge and trying to defend the exact shape of your mocking expression toward a roaming terrier. How exactly does a law enforcement officer objectively measure the sheer ugliness of a face without accidentally insulting the suspect during an arrest? 7. Between the months of January and April, pulling out your camera in Wyoming could turn you into a wanted outlaw. State legislation makes it illegal to take a photograph of a rabbit during this period without securing an official government permit. You can freely hike, camp, and explore, but the moment you try to snap a picture of a random bunny, you are violating state code. It heavily implies a plague of aggressive wildlife paparazzi, so annoying that the government had to grant seasonal privacy rights to the local wilderness rabbit population. 8. Roaming the dry North American brush with a rifle is a standard pastime, but targeting one specific, unexpected beast will ruin your life in Arizona. Hunting camels is strictly prohibited there. This bizarre rule is a lingering ghost of the 1850s, when the military abandoned an experimental camel corps and let the animals wander into the desert. Lawmakers granted them total immunity. The wild camels have been gone for generations, Yet the state remains fiercely protective of these invisible humped ghosts forever wandering the dusty legal books. 9. Weekend schedules dictate a very bizarre hierarchy of acceptable hunting targets in certain eastern jurisdictions. You are strictly forbidden from hunting almost any wild game on a Sunday, with the highly specific exception of raccoons. They are the only creatures officially denied a peaceful day of rest by the local government. Why did the state legislature collectively decide that masked trash pandas deserve absolutely zero legal protection on the weekend? It feels like a very personal, historical vendetta against these incredibly clever nocturnal bandits. 10. Vocal impressions can actually violate strict federal policies if you are exploring the dense wilderness of certain national parks in Washington. Park management explicitly prohibits visitors from imitating a wolf howl to trick the actual wild packs hiding in the forest. Amateurs standing in the woods and screaming into the dark severely disrupt the natural communication and territorial boundaries of these apex predators. The government officially ruled that your terrible animal impressions are a massive ecological hazard that actively damages the local wildlife hierarchy. 11. Want to secure your massive, long-necked pet while grabbing a quick cup of coffee? You better not try it in Atlanta, where tying a giraffe to a telephone pole is explicitly prohibited by law. It is genuinely hilarious to imagine a bewildered police officer trying to issue a parking ticket to an animal that can effortlessly eat leaves from a second-story window. Did a traveling circus really cause a chaotic traffic jam by abandoning their livestock on a public sidewalk? The sheer logistics of managing such a bizarre municipal violation are absolutely staggering. 12. Front porch decorations can easily become permanent fixtures if a wild migratory bird decides to build its nest directly on your wreath. Federal wildlife laws actively prohibit homeowners anywhere in America from destroying or moving an active nest containing eggs. Even if the aggressive avian parents constantly dive-bomb your head every time you check the mailbox, you are legally paralyzed. The government strictly prioritizes the successful hatching of those tiny, noisy chicks far above your basic ability to comfortably and safely access your own living room. 13. Great white sharks patrolling the coastline of California hold a special, highly protected legal status. It is a severe state offense to actively attract, chum for, or intentionally harass these massive predators within designated marine sanctuaries. Thrill seekers in boats were using bait to lure the carnivores closer for social media videos. This reckless behavior conditioned the sharks to associate human vessels with free meals. Officials completely outlawed the practice to ensure that apex ocean killers never view crowded tourist beaches as a reliable dining spot. 14. The human mouth is apparently classified as a prohibited weapon in certain eastern waterways. It is completely against the legal code to catch a fish using nothing but your teeth. Some overly eager outdoorsman must have grown so incredibly frustrated with his tangled fishing rod that he decided to take a hyper-predatory, bear-like approach to securing his dinner. You really have to applaud that raw, primal dedication, even if wildlife authorities decided that bobbing for slippery trout was a massive health hazard that needed to be strictly outlawed forever. 15. Online dating profiles eventually became such a massive hazard for big cats that New York officially had to intervene. State legislators proudly passed a strict law explicitly banning any direct physical contact with wild tigers at local fairs or roadside exhibits. The entire purpose of this legislation was to legally destroy the incredibly bizarre trend of tourists hugging dangerous predators just to get a cool photo for social media. Politicians literally had to wield the power of the government to stop foolish people from cuddling massive lethal carnivores. 16. Leaving a bowl of cat food on your back porch is officially classified as a severe public nuisance crime in California if it actively attracts wild raccoons. State regulations firmly ban intentionally feeding these masked nocturnal scavengers. Concentrating large numbers of these clever animals in residential backyards causes massive property damage and rapidly spreads dangerous diseases. The government essentially forces you to completely clean up your patio, legally ensuring that local wildlife continues to naturally forage in the woods rather than a suburban buffet. 17. Road trips require careful seating arrangements if you travel with primates. State law clearly dictates that a gorilla is not allowed to ride in the backseat of any car. Curiously, the legislation does not mention the passenger seat at all. This strongly implies you could legally ride shotgun with a silverback, provided you do not relegate him to the back like a misbehaving toddler. 18. Pigeons in New York City parks are officially on a government-mandated diet. A strict municipal rule states that anyone caught dumping breadcrumbs, seeds, or any other food for these feral birds will be hit with a massive financial penalty. The city parks department completely lost its patience with massive swarming flocks, leaving corrosive droppings on historical monuments and benches. By criminalizing the act of tossing a simple bagel crust, officials are desperately trying to force these highly aggressive urban scavengers to find their own natural food sources entirely. 19. Heavy agricultural machinery eventually replaced manual animal labor, but lawmakers had to ensure one specific exotic beast was excluded from the workforce. It is entirely illegal to use an elephant to plow a cotton field. The logistics of secretly importing a massive pachyderm to help with the southern harvest are genuinely astounding. It proves that at some point, a farmer realized a tractor was way too expensive and opted for a giant circus animal instead, leading to a frantic legislative crackdown to protect the massive creature from farm chores. 20. Certain amphibians produce powerful defensive toxins, which inevitably led to a very strange, highly illegal human hobby. City ordinances specifically outlaw the act of licking a toad to achieve a hallucinogenic high. Lawmakers were forced to explicitly ban citizens from crawling through local parks at night to press their tongues against slimy, warts-covered creatures. The sheer desperation required to view a swamp-dwelling amphibian as a viable recreational substance is deeply troubling, completely validating the government's swift intervention here. 21. Put the controller down and pack the camera away immediately. Federal park regulations inside Yellowstone completely prohibit launching a drone to film the local grizzly bears. The high-pitched mechanical whine of a quadcopter drives these massive apex predators absolutely insane. When tech-obsessed tourists kept buzzing the bears for cinematic aerial footage, it caused deadly stress and unpredictable aggression. Law enforcement will immediately confiscate your expensive equipment and issue a devastating fine. Your amateur nature documentary is simply not worth the risk. 22. Importing a notoriously smelly woodland creature across state lines will instantly trigger a massive legal headache. It is completely against the law to bring a live skunk into the territory, regardless of whether it has been descented or domesticated. Authorities were entirely unwilling to risk a catastrophic odor event at the border. The idea of Border Patrol agents frantically searching a vehicle for hidden contraband only to discover a remarkably fluffy but highly illegal stink badger is exactly why these obscure wildlife rules are so entertaining. 23. True luxury means never having to leave your room to engage in a frontier safari. Or at least, that was the vibe in 1800s Texas before authorities officially made it illegal to shoot a buffalo from the second-story window of a hotel. The sheer, unadulterated laziness required to hunt a massive roaming beast while leaning over your cozy balcony is absolutely staggering. 24. Florida statute makes it a serious criminal offense to intentionally feed a wild alligator. While tossing a leftover hot dog to a massive swamp lizard might seem like a thrilling vacation activity, state authorities heavily disagree. Training prehistoric predators to naturally associate clueless tourists with free snacks completely destroys their instinctual fear of humans. This specific law exists purely because visitors repeatedly treated 10-foot apex carnivores like stray dogs, forcing the government to step in and legally prevent completely avoidable, horrifying swamp accidents. 25. Colorado. Title 33 clearly outlines that it is a serious criminal offense to hunt any wild game while under the influence of alcohol. It is genuinely terrifying to realize that this specific legislation was deemed absolutely necessary. The undeniable combination of heavily armed individuals wandering through thick mountain forests after drinking several beers is a spectacular recipe for an unmitigated disaster. Law enforcement officers had to officially codify this rule because relying on basic human common sense completely failed to stop drunk outdoorsmen from stalking wild animals. 26. Organizing or participating in a bear wrestling match is strictly prohibited by law. For a terrifying period in history, watching a confident human willingly step into a ring with a massive, lethal predator was considered acceptable weekend entertainment. Lawmakers eventually had to outlaw the practice to save foolish athletes from their own catastrophic hubris. Honestly, the bear was probably just intensely confused by the entire ridiculous ordeal. 27. Public transportation has standard rules of etiquette, but one city had to explicitly address a very wild commuting loophole. It is completely against the law to bring a live, untamed badger into a public taxicab. The image of a bewildered driver checking the rearview mirror to see an incredibly angry, burrowing woodland predator chilling in the back seat is pure comedy. You genuinely have to wonder who was trying to split a fare with such a hostile creature. Did the badger at least offer to cover the generous tip after ruining the upholstery with its massive claws? 28. Counterfeiting exotic pets is a genuinely weird crime that requires an impressive level of deceptive artistic dedication. One state strictly forbids anyone from painting a common sparrow to sell it off as a highly colorful parakeet. Someone actually ran a fraudulent avian business, scamming overly trusting customers by coloring wild street birds with cheap dyes. Imagine the profound disappointment of purchasing a vibrant tropical pet, only to watch its beautiful colors wash completely away during its very first bath. It is a truly hilarious historical scam. 29. Gentle sea cows deserve absolute peace, which is exactly why authorities strictly forbid anyone from riding or attempting to harness a wild manatee. These majestic creatures are practically floating baked potatoes, completely defenseless and slow-moving. While the core intention behind the rule is pure conservation, it paints a hilarious mental picture of overly enthusiastic tourists treating them like underwater ponies. Sometimes nature just wants to slowly drift along without having to deal with an uninvited aquatic rodeo organized by bored vacationers. 30. Traffic frustrations must be handled with extreme delicacy when navigating the sunny streets of Key West, Florida. The city is famous for its massive population of completely feral wild chickens that roam the sidewalks. Local law makes it officially illegal to aggressively honk your car horn simply to scare these wandering birds out of your way. Drivers are legally required to patiently wait for the arrogant poultry to finish crossing the road. The government essentially granted total municipal authority to a bunch of incredibly stubborn, loud tropical roosters. 31. Moose are already incredibly unpredictable creatures, but giving them alcohol is a recipe for absolute disaster. Lawmakers in one northern town made it strictly illegal to offer a cold beer to any wandering moose. A local legend claims an intoxicated moose once terrorized a community after discovering a brewery's fermented waste. Can you even begin to comprehend the sheer terror of facing down a belligerent, drunken, half-ton forest giant with an attitude problem? It is no wonder local authorities immediately banned this ridiculous woodland happy hour. 32. Playing recorded animal sounds from your smartphone to attract wildlife is strictly banned across all United States national parks. Enthusiastic bird watchers used to blast digital mating calls into the forest to lure rare species out of hiding. This artificial noise completely disrupts natural breeding cycles and causes severe stress to the local ecosystem. Federal authorities had to formally classify your portable speaker as a highly disruptive ecological weapon. Enjoying the wilderness now legally requires you to maintain absolute silence and wait patiently instead. 33. Using modern aviation to completely ruin the concept of a fair chase is strictly forbidden in Montana. State wildlife regulations explicitly outlaw flying a drone to locate or track wild game animals. Before this rule passed, lazy outdoorsmen were launching noisy quadcopters over the mountains, treating an ancient survival tradition like a high-tech video game. Lawmakers realized that giving humans personal aerial surveillance completely destroyed the natural balance of the wilderness. Now you actually have to use your own eyes and walk into the woods to find a wild elk. 34. Birdwatching is usually a quiet, peaceful hobby, but aggressive communication can get you in massive trouble. In one specific coastal municipality, it is legally forbidden to intentionally whistle at a seagull. These incredibly loud, fry-stealing scavengers already rule the local beaches, so why did the government feel the absolute need to protect them from human whistling? the legislation completely ignores the fact that the birds are actively screaming at tourists all day long. It is entirely unclear who the real victim of harassment is in this ridiculous situation. 35. Modern aviation changed the world, but it also forced politicians to set strict boundaries on ridiculous aerial behavior. A highly specific state law firmly prohibits hunting any wild ducks directly from an airplane. The logistics of leaning out of a moving aircraft to track a flying bird are incredibly dangerous and entirely absurd. Someone actually tried to turn the peaceful morning skies into an intense, high-altitude dogfight with the local waterfowl. It is a brilliant reminder that humans will aggressively weaponize absolutely any new technology. 36. Cryptids usually belong in folklore, but one specific county firmly integrated a legendary beast into its official legal code. It is classified as both a felony and a massive fine to actively hunt or kill Bigfoot within the local borders. The government actually created a protective sanctuary for an entirely unproven forest monster. They cleverly turned a bizarre local myth into a highly lucrative tourist attraction backed by genuine legislation. Would you actually risk the hefty prison sentence just to finally prove that the legendary creature is completely real? 37. Beachfront snacks are fiercely protected by municipal authorities in Ocean City, New Jersey, but not in the way you might naturally expect. The government passed a strict ordinance making it completely illegal to feed the wild seagulls. These aggressive birds had essentially evolved into highly organized airborne street gangs, relentlessly dive-bombing innocent tourists to steal their expensive French fries. The local police force officially stepped in to criminalize the handouts, desperately trying to break the endless cycle of terrifying avian fast food robberies. 38. Aquatic encounters sound incredibly magical until federal authorities officially step in to ruin your vacation plans in Hawaii. Strict regulations completely ban anyone from swimming within 50 yards of a wild spinner dolphin. While tourists desperately want a magical underwater experience, these specific dolphins use the shallow coastal waters to actually sleep while slowly swimming. Lawmakers brilliantly realized that treating exhausted, slumbering marine mammals like interactive theme park attractions was deeply cruel, making it a severe federal wildlife crime. 39. Mind control is not something usually associated with the animal kingdom, but certain lawmakers felt compelled to address the terrifying possibility. It is genuinely illegal to purposefully hypnotize a frog in public. We have absolutely no idea what kind of chaotic swamp magic was happening in the local parks to justify this specific ban. Was a rogue street magician convincing innocent amphibians to perform embarrassing stunts for massive crowds? The fact that a judge actually had to sign off on anti-hypnosis frog legislation is pure, unadulterated comedy. 40. Sin City has plenty of massive restrictions, but one specific rule in Las Vegas targets an incredibly mundane airborne nuisance. Local authorities made it officially illegal to feed wild pigeons anywhere near the famous strip. While millions of tourists happily gamble away their life savings indoors, throwing a simple breadcrumb to a street bird outside will immediately trigger a serious legal citation. The city grew completely tired of scraping acidic bird droppings off their glamorous million-dollar statues. 41. Exactly 25 yards is the legally mandated safety barrier between you and a wild bison in Yellowstone National Park. Park rangers do not view this distance as a polite suggestion. Approaching these massive 2,000-pound herbivores any closer immediately violates federal regulations. Tourists constantly underestimate their explosive speed, resulting in terrifying trampling incidents every single year. The government instituted this exact mathematical boundary to keep clueless vacationers from treating wild, unpredictable beasts like petting zoo attractions. 42. Because invasive species utterly destroy delicate ecosystems, Florida officially made it a crime to intentionally release a wild green iguana. These massive, fast-breeding reptiles were originally brought over as exotic pets, but escapees quickly established an absolute biological empire in the hot swamps. Now, they freely roam the cities, digging destructive tunnels and ruining local infrastructure. The state desperately passed strict laws to completely halt further releases, trying to regain control over a rogue reptilian population that treats the sunny peninsula like a buffet. 43. California Fish and Game Code absolutely forbids using a high-powered spotlight to temporarily blind and freeze wild deer in the dark. This deeply unethical tactic, commonly known as spotlighting, removes every single aspect of fair chase from the outdoor experience. The sudden blinding glare paralyzes the wild animal completely, making it a perfectly stationary target. Lawmakers stepped in to heavily criminalize this cowardly approach, ensuring that engaging with local nocturnal wildlife remains a challenging, respectful pursuit rather than a guaranteed, lazy roadside execution. 44. Soothing the savage beast with beautiful melodies is a classic poetic trope, but it is heavily regulated in reality. A very obscure local ordinance makes it entirely illegal to play the violin for a captive wild bear. Were traveling musicians treating dangerous predators like unappreciative concert critics? The law heavily implies that an impromptu musical performance either deeply annoyed the local bears or triggered an aggressively unpredictable response. Sometimes majestic forest giants just want total silence instead of your amateur classical recital. 45. Petting a beautiful, seemingly gentle wild pony on Assateague Island in Maryland will result in immediate financial penalties. These feral horses roam freely across the sandy beaches, looking incredibly approachable. Unfortunately, they are fiercely territorial and completely untamed, frequently biting or kicking tourists who invade their personal space. Park management legally enforces a strict 40-foot exclusion zone around the animals. The rule actively prevents careless vacationers from treating a highly unpredictable feral beast like a domesticated trail pony. 46. Pouring liquor down a fish's throat sounds like the punchline to a terrible frat house joke, but it is a genuine legal offense in Ohio. Sometime in history, local authorities realized that bored residents were actively trying to inebriate aquatic life. They officially banned getting a fish drunk to stop these deeply weird underwater happy hours. The sheer logistics of intoxicating a base are baffling enough without bringing local law enforcement into the mix. It serves as a permanent monument to the incredible stupidity of weekend boredom. 47. If you tie your pet alligator to a parking meter in Florida, state rules dictate you must pay the standard hourly parking fee. The city government absolutely does not care about the public safety hazard of a tethered carnivore on the sidewalk. They just demand their precious municipal revenue. 48. 300 yards is the strict mathematical boundary you must observe when navigating near wild orcas in Washington state. Federal law treats the southern resident killer whales like aquatic royalty. If you are piloting a boat and a pod suddenly surfaces nearby, you are legally obligated to cut your engine and maintain a massive distance. The noise from boat propellers interferes with their biological sonar, making it impossible for them to hunt salmon. Authorities strictly enforce this buffer zone to keep the ocean quiet enough for the whales to successfully eat. 49. Relying on futuristic technology to harvest dinner is frowned upon in Washington, where using a laser sight to target wild animals is prohibited. Wildlife management firmly believes that outdoor pursuits should rely on traditional marksmanship and natural skill, not tactical military hardware. Emitting a bright red dot onto a wild deer completely changes the fundamental dynamic of the wilderness experience. Lawmakers established this firm rule to preserve the historical integrity of the woods, actively preventing modern hunters from treating the ancient forest like an arcade game. Alright, we have navigated through 49 incredibly absurd points, and there is only one final law left. But before we reveal number 50, it is time for the final verdict. In our opinion, the absolute greatest, most unbelievable rule from today's list has to be the ban on hypnotizing a frog in public. Simply because the mental image of a rogue street magician trying to actively mind control a swamp amphibian is too brilliantly stupid to ignore. Do you agree with our ruling, or does another wildlife law truly deserve the crown? And now, our grand finale. 50. Charity events and local community lotteries operate under highly unusual biological restrictions throughout North Carolina. State statutes explicitly ban organizers from ever offering any live wild animal as a raffle prize. Somewhere in local history, a clever fundraising committee apparently decided that handing a captive woodland predator to a random ticket winner was a fantastic entertainment idea. Lawmakers swiftly intervened to legally stop this chaotic practice. Winning a completely untamed, heavily stressed beast at a local bingo night is now entirely against the law. These rules exist as a permanent monument to human absurdity. No matter how wild nature gets, our capacity for stupid decisions will always surpass it. We regulated the wilderness just to keep ourselves safe from our own boredom. So, are we actually the smartest species on the planet, or just the luckiest? Let us know below. Drop a like, subscribe, and keep questioning the strange world around you.